So this second presentation, second lecture on the hero's journey is going to be focused on applying the hero's journey to a specific film in series. We're going to look at hero's journey as applied to Star Wars. Now, as I indicated in the first lecture, the hero's journey became a common idea, was first proposed as a universal pattern for this kind of stories by Joseph Campbell in the 70s. And he plotted a path and said, all myth stories have most of these points. In fact, in his opinion, almost all stories have most of these points. But nobody has. He never said that there was any one traditionally, culturally generated myth that had all of them. But George Lucas, who saw the popularity of The Hero of a Thousand Faces, the book that Campbell wrote that published this idea, got excited about it as a means of telling a story and said, oh man, there are great stories that, that use this. And he sat down and consciously took what Campbell put together by looking at all the stories and said, I'm going to follow all of it. And he did that as the basic plot for the original Star Wars in 1977, which we're going to look at in a little bit in detail here in a minute. And he also did it in a larger scale with the overall journey of Luke Skywalker through the original 3 films and of Anakin over the original 6 films. So we have these interlocking heroes' journeys in a really neat way. So we're going to start with Star Wars. According to our hero's journey, our hero starts out in the ordinary world. What is ordinary for them? Remember I said it's not necessarily ordinary for us, and we have this picture of Tatooine, a desert planet, 2 suns, all of that. This is ordinary for Luke, though. He's a normal kid. Nobody's ever heard of him. He's a moisture farmer. He receives a call to adventure. The droids show up and present him with Leia's message. And Leia's message makes him think of Ben Kenobi. And so he's willing to go that far, to go talk to Ben, who's a local character, and see if Ben knows who this Obi-Wan Kenobi guy is that's in the message the droid showed him. He goes out and he gets in trouble, and this allows George Lucas to play up Ben Kenobi. Old Ben is how they refer to him for a while. Excuse me. And who we learn that he is the Obi-Wan Kenobi from the message, a member of an ancient order of knights, kind of wizard-like. They have supernatural powers and they have swords and things. And he offers to become Luke's mentor and to lead him out into the world to confront the evil of the Empire, which he says is Luke's destiny. Luke says no. And he's not sure, and he says no, and then he goes, oh, crud, the Empire's after me? And Obi-Wan says, absolutely. And he says, well, I've got to get home and make sure that my family is okay. He gets there, and we have the adventure is forced upon him. So Luke refuses the call to adventure offered to him by Obi-Wan Kenobi, but then he goes home and he finds out, well, there's nothing to stay home for. Home's not there anymore. It's been destroyed. So he turns to the one person he knows, this strange new mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is telling him that he has the chance to be this great hero and have this great destiny, and follows him out into the wider world. Now, before they leave Tatooine, we come to the first threshold, which is at Mos Eisley. The first obstacle to Luke getting out in the world and fulfilling his destiny is getting off the planet. The Empire controls the spaceways. How is he going to get out? We see several things happen. This is the beginning of the road of trials that continues through most of the rest of the movie. The first part of it is designed to test Luke. Can he, with his allies, prove himself a worthy hero? Can he become what he needs to become in order to be able to help everybody else? Well, the first step to doing that is to get off the planet. He gathers allies in Chewbacca and Han at the Mos Eisley Cantina, And between Han's skills and Obi-Wan's Jedi mind tricks, they manage to get into the Falcon, Han's ship, and escape the planet. The first place they go is the planet Alderaan, and the film shows us that their next obstacle is Alderaan doesn't exist anymore. During cutaway scenes, as Luke is trying to get off of Tatooine, we see Princess Leia, who was captured in the action sequence that plays as a hook at the beginning of the film. She watches her planet be destroyed by the bad guys. They blow up the entire planet with the Death Star's laser. So Luke goes to where Alderaan was, and it's just an asteroid field, and their road of trials continues. They are caught in the tractor beam of the Death Star and pulled into this space station. The heroes come closest to losing at this point. It talks about in the story how, in the hero's journey, how as the road of trials goes through the descent, we see this great ordeal and a moment where it seems like the heroes seem to have lost or to have died. We see this happen twice. Once to the main group together and once to Obi-Wan alone. Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot. They add their final ally member of the team, Princess Leia, there as part of the Road of Trials. The first person who we see meet apparent defeat or death is Obi-Wan Kenobi. He meets Vader, his old nemesis, and they fight, and Obi-Wan disappears. Now, we find out later that he has chosen to pass to another plane of existence and left this plane. He has died, but it's intentionally, and he's moving on. It appears, though, to someone who hasn't seen the film before and doesn't know what's going on, that Obi-Wan has died, and that's how the other heroes take it. Now, just before that, I actually got these backwards, the heroes themselves are trying to escape, and we talk about the descent, right? The journey into the underworld. How are they going to get out? They're in trouble, they're in trouble, they're in trouble. The place they're in the most trouble, they dive and literally fall down a hole into this garbage pit, the underworld, the hell of the Death Star, and they're stuck in there, and something is attacking them and trying to kill them. And if you haven't watched the film before, Lucas kind of plays it for laughs, but it actually sounds and looks a little bit like they're dying. You know, if someone wasn't very closely following along, you have another fake death. But they overcome it, they escape with Leia and the plans and what they need to help the Rebel Alliance. So they have their great boon, they've captured it, and they've gotten away at the cost of losing Obi-Wan. They managed to, since Obi-Wan got the tractor beam down, they managed to get out and fly away. You have the magical flight. In this case, it's a scientific flight. And they are fighting the enemy and fight their way out, and they manage to get back. Now, we do not have a refusal of the return here, or really a moment of despair on the way back. Star Wars is pretty straightforward. Luke heads back to the other worlds, out of this strange world of adventure and testing of the Death Star into more ordinary space where it's not giant machine worlds. And he meets up with the Rebel Alliance, where the plans that he has saved, and unknown to everyone else, his own abilities, will prove the key to defeating the Emperor. So Luke is ready now. We're going to have this showdown, climactic battle now that he's returned and joined the good guy army, and we're going to defeat this bigger threat. Luke's personal victory has, in large sense, already come. He's accepted that he might be a Jedi, that he can be a hero. He's done some amazing things. And we see his gift in play here. It becomes key. A whole group of heroes goes to blow up the Death Star. And we have the Battle of Yavin as they attack the Death Star. Luke ends up in the trench. Everyone else gets blown up or pushed out, and he's in there alone. And he tries to use technology and his old abilities from the ordinary world to win, and he can't. But then his new ability to hear Obi-Wan's voice and use the Force allows him to blow up the Death Star. And he returns to the Rebel Alliance where they are greeted as heroes. That's him. over here. Unfortunately, this was the photo I could find, and Harrison Ford is more popular than either of the other guys, so Han's right in the middle of it. But they get their reward. They're recognized as in the language of the hero's journey as master of two worlds, and they are free to live. And as Star Wars ends, it's done. Luke has gone all the way around the circle. Okay? But when it made enough money that they could continue making movies, we can go to a larger version that goes through all three of the first films. Again, we see Luke as the ordinary person. He's on Tatooine. He gets a call to adventure, goes off and meets his mentor. We know that initially he refuses and then ends up stuck to it. We have a series of periods where he's gathering allies for his great battle. He gets Han and Chewie. He gets Princess Leia. He gets the Rebel Alliance. And we have victories and setbacks on these trials as we move further and further along. Luke's personal journey is extended. We find out in Empire that he's not a full Jedi yet. Obviously, Obi-Wan disappeared pretty early on, and Luke has to go get the rest of his training to truly finish his personal journey. He goes and meets Yoda, his second mentor. He ends up on Dagobah, where he journeys into this dark underworld, literally a cave, where he meets an evil version of himself. It talks about meeting the Father. Well, Luke meets Darth Vader in that cave and fights him, and he cuts his head off, and inside the mask is Luke's face. So the idea is that you have to overcome yourself, and all of this mythic symbolism is there. Now, Luke won't listen to his mentor, and he goes off early and goes to an even greater defeat. And at the end of The Empire Strikes Back, we have the low point of the three films. The whole of Empire turns New Hope into a descent. And you have the descent into darkness. Okay? And Luke meets Vader, who claims to be his dad, and cuts his hand off. Han gets frozen in carbonite. And they all take off to their different places. Now, when we open Return of the Jedi, we are in new places with new problems. They're back on Tatooine in Jabba's palace. Not everyone is back together again. So we're in this magic flight trying to get everyone back together to this normal world where you have everyone together. And Luke shows up and he's got new powers. He is now almost entirely a Jedi. And he faces down Jabba, which shows off his new powers, and then leads the mission to Endor, where he meets his dad. We end up with a second meeting with the Father at the threshold, and he fights his dad. His triumph is in deciding not to. I am a Jedi like my father before me. And his gift of being a Jedi allows him to save his dad, who saves his life. And then we have the Force Ghosts that symbolize that master of two worlds there at the end. With Anakin, you have an even longer one. The whole first movie functions as the first act, the call to adventure. He goes off at the end of it, across the first threshold to become a Jedi, where he is trained by his mentor, Obi-Wan. Eventually, he ends up being corrupted by Palpatine, who becomes a Dark Father figure. He kills the younglings, he attacks Obi-Wan and almost dies, and he finds out that his wife, who he thought he was saving, he has killed. Okay, then we have this long period during which Vader refuses to come back. He's gone too far, he's fallen too far, and he won't come back. We see him do nasty things to all kinds of people. He finds out that Luke is alive, and he starts to think about coming back. He tells Luke that he and Luke could conquer the Empire and rule it themselves. Luke won't do it. Luke invites him to return. Come back, be good, he says. Vader refuses, they fight, and finally Luke convinces him, and Vader turns his back on the dark side and chucks the Emperor down the shaft. He returns as Anakin, and we see him again as a Force Ghost, as the Master of Two Worlds, having used his boon for the final defeat of the Empire.